fellow traveler. Welcome to Third Eye Awakening, a podcast all about spiritual and psychic awakening, where we talk about the shift from 3D to 5D consciousness, the nature of time, space, the universe, multi-dimensions, starseeds, the Akashic Records, you know, all that good shit. I am your host, Amy Melissa. Thank you so much for being here with me today. All right, let's do this. Hi, beautiful people. Well, here I am, late again. I have no consistency currently with getting these episodes recorded and up. And I'm just going to have to accept that about myself. Hopefully you accept it too. I apologize. I know consistency is important, but frig. Number one, my life is busy. Number two, something that I foolishly didn't take into account with my plan to record this story in the depth that I am recording it and sharing it here is that, I can't just, oh, I have a spare hour. Let me just sit down and record the story of my, very challenging, emotionally turbulent, grief and anxiety filled second pregnancy. I need all this time to sort of chill first and then kind of get in touch with that part of myself, because part of carrying on with grief, or in spite of grief, I'm not sure, is sort of a necessary compartmentalizing that happens where, you just I think for fucking seriously survival reasons, the average human can't exist in a state of acute grief for more than a certain period of time, because it's not even just about having to carry on with life and go and be an adult and do all the stupid adulting. It's just the human psyche cannot handle that sustained depth of blackness and sadness for, too long. And so you just end up figuring out a way to disconnect from it to maintain sanity, I guess. So basically, what I'm saying is that it takes me a while to really get back in touch with that experience so that I can tell it in a way that doesn't sound like a weird mechanical rendition of the facts. Which is why I said in my last episode at the end that I figured I'd be, air quotes, on time publishing this episode because I had most of it already recorded. But then when I went back to listen to it, it sounded very mechanical. I got into reading my ultrasound reports and everything, and it sounds very medical lingo, and I'm pretty sure none of you listening are here for that. It's an issue I've had. Anyhow, so here I am. It's take 2 of this particular episode. Episode 3 of Cillian's story. Also, sidebar, this is going to be a really long series because, there's a lot to it. And I really do deeply do want to share all the subtlety and nuance of the experience for anybody who cares to hear it. If you don't, if this is no real relevance to you and you're oh my God, get to the point, Amy, then by all means, there's no need to listen all the way through. I have a couple of podcast interviews on different people's podcasts where, I fit the story into an hour, the salient points, including the magic to it. So if you're seriously, I don't have time for this, that's cool. Do what you got to do. If you're curious though, and you want to hear kind of what happened and how it changed my life, then You can check me out on Viola Hug's podcast called Abundant Babes Podcast, or Soul Radiant Radio with Lauren McMullen, who is going to be an interview guest later on my podcast, or Jessica Reed's podcast, Spirit Girls, the Spirit Girls podcast. I did interviews with all three of them and kind of cut to the chase. So yeah. Okay, back to Cillian's story. Here I go. So at the end of the last episode, I left it at the place where my water had broken. I'd gone to the hospital, had been admitted to stay for 48 hours, and had a follow-up ultrasound that was sort of going to be the deciding factor in terms of like what to do next, how to move forward. And on that ultrasound, Cillian still looked great. I mean, as they can see in ultrasounds, which they really, ultrasounds don't give you that much information. But what they could tell me was that the amniotic fluid was reaccumulating, and it felt like a confirmation of what I already knew, because when the OB offered me the chance to terminate at that time, like when my water broke, and I just intuitively felt, like I said, like I could really understand the rationale behind that option and why some people would choose that option truly, and choose it out of a place, well, for different reasons, a place of fear and or a place of love. They're certainly not mutually exclusive. A place of alleviating or preventing further suffering for their baby. You know, there's a lot of reasons that somebody would choose that option. And for me at the time, in that particular situation, I felt like, no, he's not going to be a stillbirth. He's not going to be a stillbirth. It wasn't a hopeful feeling. It was like, I don't know. How do you say? I don't want to say I knew, because how could I know? But it felt like a knowing. So when I saw 48 hours later that the amniotic fluid was accumulating, I felt, I don't know, it was like a confirmation of that knowing that I had. And so we just made a plan for me to go on bed rest, with air quotes, bathroom privileges, but at home. And, just wait and see, and basically come back every week for an ultrasound. I guess the idea was like to make sure the fluid was continuing to accumulate, make sure that the baby was, I guess, looking, again, I say this in air quotes because 2D ultrasounds don't give us a whole heck of a lot of information, but they do give us something, that the baby was growing, and I think most importantly that the baby hadn't died. So I went home and I was there. My water broke at 20 weeks gestation. And the reason that I was on bed rest at home was because at that point, a fetus is not viable. So a baby who's born that early on, I think I said this in my last episode, would not be able to survive on the outside. The lungs are not developed enough. Like our technology, our very, very advanced technology cannot compensate for the lack of development of a fetus at only 20 weeks gestation. And sort of the accepted limit of viability, widely accepted, is 24 weeks. So I spent 4 weeks at home on bed rest, trying to manage my incredible fear and anxiety, as you can imagine. It was really challenging because, well, for a number of reasons. first of all, it was fucking hot that summer, and our apartment was on the 3rd floor, and it was west facing. So, by the morning, everything had cooled off, but around 1 p.m., the sun would start coming back in through all of our windows and bounce off the laminate floors, and it just was like a baking inferno from hell. And I was on bed rest, so it's not like I could go outside to escape it. I was just sort of stuck in this hot ass apartment. And that sounds like a really trivial complaint, but it's not, because when you're trying to manage your fear and anxiety about a very real situation, all of those things contribute to make you feel even more uncomfortable and even more cagey and crazy, and like you can't escape your circumstances. So that was one reason that it was really hard. And then obviously, I don't know if you can imagine being on bed rest, but that's really challenging too, because I am not a type A personality, as you can tell by the lateness of my podcast episode publications. I'm driven, but I wouldn't say that I'm obsessive about it. I just have creative ambitions. So I'm really good at chilling out, really good. I can binge watch Netflix with the best of them. I can read, I can meditate, I can just let my imagination wander, I can journal. I'm not somebody that ever gets bored, because I feel like there's always so many things to do, so many things that I want to do. So on one hand, I made the most of it and I enjoyed the opportunity to chill out. But 4 consecutive weeks of chilling out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, of course, starts in the heat, in the baking heat, while you're worried about the outcome of your pregnancy is tough. It's really tough. And I drank more water than I have ever drunk before, and my body thanked me for it, that's for sure. I felt amazingly hydrated. And I just tried to keep my morale up. Lucky for me, like I've said a couple times before, I am very optimistic. I'm truly an optimist. And I'm not, I can't seem to stay very long in a place of bad emotion. That wasn't true of me before, truthfully. When I was younger and going through all of my various stages of spiritual awakening, I definitely felt like shit a lot. And boy, would I nurse those moods. I would nurse them with a sense of entitlement. But something shifted between, I guess the period of time before I met Alex, maybe the period of time where I manifested my way into the midwifery program, I guess. It was probably when I started manifesting and realizing that, oh, holy shit, I have so much influence over my experience. So much influence just by the vibration that I, allow myself to stay at, my baseline vibration. So I got quite good at through the years before all this happened with Cillian, I got quite good at maintaining a high vibration. I did a lot of work listening to Louise Hay on audiobook, or maybe it was iTunes. I don't know, whatever. I listened to a lot of Louise Hay. I would literally listen to her body loving one every night as I was falling asleep for 6 months, and it made such a huge difference. And so I got to a place where I raised my vibration incrementally over time, over a period of a couple years, and by the time I was going through all of this fear and uncertainty, incredible fear and vulnerability and uncertainty with Cillian, I had gotten really good at feeling the dip in my vibration, feeling what fear was doing to my vibration, and being able to bring it back up. And it was definitely deliberate, but my optimism helps. It helps for sure. So every week I was going for these ultrasounds, and on the ultrasounds, they saw this gigantic hematoma, which was from that little fender bender that I was in. The radiologist commented on marginal placental abruption, which means that the edge of the placenta came away, very much like, if you peel off part of the sticker. All the little blood vessels that were feeding into that piece of the placenta, just like now they have nowhere to go, so they just free bleed and collect in the uterus and in between the amniotic sac and the wall of the uterus. So it was like 11 centimeters long. I'm not kidding. That I did review my ultrasound reports to make sure I wasn't going to exaggerate it. It was like 4.4 centimeters wide by 1.3 centimeters thick by 11 centimeters long. That's a big fucking hematoma. And anyway, that helped a lot too. I really feel for all the people who go through pregnancy losses or challenges and have no idea what happened, because I feel like at least I always had that. And much as I obsessed for a little while over that hematoma, and that wasn't good for me, I also kind of like understood what was happening, why this happened. It didn't, I've met people in my grief support community that have had term stillbirths and they don't know why. Like, medical science doesn't know why. Or people who lose babies to SIDS and they just never know why. And I just, there aren't words. There just aren't words. But my heart deeply, deeply goes out to them. I had an explanation, so I understood why this was all happening. Did that make it better? Yes, I would say it did. I would say it didn't change the fact that probably I was going to lose my son, and I always knew that. But I guess, I don't know. It was just something for me to cling to, for my brain to make sense of. I guess that's all it is. And I mean, our brain desperately wants that, doesn't it? It helps to it helps to foster the illusion of control. Anyway, so I was going for all these ultrasounds, and they only measure the baby's growth every other week, but so every other week was just to check the amniotic fluid volume, and then every other week was for amniotic fluid volume and growth. And I was able to observe that it really made a difference for me to drink all that water. One week I got super discouraged and thought, like, I kind of gave up. I started to really question my choices and wondered if I was needlessly subjecting my son to pain and suffering. And my fears got the better of me, and I really had some very dark moments of self-doubt and panic, sustained ongoing moments, like for the better part of a week. And I just stopped drinking so much water because I felt hopeless. I was like, nothing I do can fix this, because I was always also like, I'm either in bed or on the couch all the time, except when I'm going to the bathroom or getting up to get myself more water. And all the time, no matter what I do, no matter how I sit, no matter what position I'm in, I can feel fluid leaking out of me. And it just, sometimes it was really discouraging. It's not even the right word. Disheartening? I don't know. Anyway, like I said, one week, those feelings got the better of me, and I just was like, what's the point in drinking all this water? Nothing I do can change what's happening. And then I went for the ultrasound that week, and there was almost no amniotic fluid, and that was so stressful. And then I spun out really hard after that. I called my midwife, Sarah, to chat about it. And, she really couldn't tell me anything because she's not God. She doesn't know the answers. But she at least helped me to work through that really intense shittiness. And I kind of found my way back to center and, maintained that as long as he has a heartbeat, I support his life, that I fucking believe in him. I believe in him was how I felt. And I don't even know what that means because, like, does that imply that if he, like, believing in him as though, like, life is the ultimate outcome? I don't know. I guess so. I guess because when you're pregnant and it's a wanted pregnancy, of course you just fucking want to meet and hold your baby. It's all you want. It's all you want. Ultimately, it's all you want. But, so I guess I believed in him in the sense that I just believed in his strength. I could feel it. I could feel his strength. I could feel it in his wild little punchy, kicky movements. He was definitely a little force in there. But I just, I'm sensitive to the energy of my children and the energy of people and the world in general. And I could sense his incredible life force. And I was just like, I can't pull the plug on that. It's so strong. Like, if he's got to go, he's got to go. But I can't send him away, was what I kept coming back to in my individual situation with that individual pregnancy. And so I would sort of like go through these incredibly, almost dizzying variations of emotion, like between like incredible optimism and just a fucking like absolute intuitive knowing that he was okay, knowing that we were going to meet him, versus like true fear that I was doing something wrong and cruel and selfish, or fear, oh man, I had a lot of fear. What if I had a stillbirth by myself? Because Alex had to go to work every day. Like I couldn't carry on with my midwifery placement, obviously. Everything was on hold. I was allowed to contact the student loan program, explain my situation, and agree to carry on with my coursework component so that I could still have the OSAP that the Ontario student... I can't remember what it stands for. It's a student loan, whatever. So that I could have the OSAP, keep it the OSAP that I was issued, because otherwise I would have had fucking no money. That was really stressful too, really stressful. So I was alone all the time, working on my coursework. I had a virtual tutorial once a week that kind of kept me feeling like not isolated and sane. And, my really wonderful friend Erin came to visit me, and she washed my floor because it was gross and tidiness is not Alex's strong point. And then she painted my toenails, which is really sweet of her. And so there were those things that kept me from feeling like completely isolated. But honestly, most of the time I was alone. Alex had to go to work. He had to. Somebody had to make money. And I had a lot of fear that I was going to have a stillbirth by myself. And ironically, you know what my biggest fear was? Is what he was going to look like. Like it wasn't even, of course I was afraid of losing him, but I kind of already knew that that was a possibility. So I suppose I had been able to come to terms to an extent with that as a possibility. But what my biggest fear was what if he comes out And like, what is he gonna look like? Even though, like, I'm a fucking, well, I'm a midwife now. I was a midwifery student at the time. Like, I know what they look like, but I don't know. It just, that was really scary. Really, really, really scary for me. And I would have a couple of dreams that he was born and he was this tiny little strange looking thing and he was alive and I'd have to keep him warm and put a hat on him and yeah, it was a lot to deal with emotionally. But I'm so glad I went through all that spiritual awakening before this happened because, you know, not to say that like I've arrived at awakening because I don't think there is an arrival point, but it gave me a relationship to the universe, to the benevolent forces of the universe, the benevolent force that is the universe, that allowed me to cope. Yeah, it allowed me to cope. I had developed a belief system based on my experiences that got me through that period of deeply frightening, like, darkness and void of not knowing. Yeah. So, for example, one of the ways that my cultivated belief system helped me was in like truly knowing that he was there because of the experiences that I'd had with Frances and, you know, picking up on Frances's energy, even like as a dumb young girl in her very early 20s, picking up on Frances's energy when he was in the womb and then being able to communicate with him telepathically after he was born, as well as the experience of feeling my grandma come through to me so clearly after she passed away just a few years prior. I really believed that it was Cillian that I was feeling, and I just didn't question that. Like, I was beyond the point of questioning it. First of all, what benefit would it bring me to question it? Let's just say, just for the sake of argument, that this is all fucking made up in my head and I'm full of shit and whatever. When you're going through something like that, if you, in the explanation of it all being my imagination, if I was imagining that I was communicating with the spirit of my baby and that made me feel better, then why would I question it? Who fucking cares if it's imaginary? Who cares? But I really don't believe that it was imaginary at all, based on the experience that I'd had before. And so that helped me to feel like, how do I explain it? I remember going to one of my ultrasounds, and it was a new ultrasound technician, and, you know, they get kind of like an explanation on the ultrasound requisition, like what the background is and why this ultrasound assessment is happening. And she said to me that she was really sorry that I was going through this. And I said to her, and I fucking absolutely 100% meant it, that, well, I thanked her for, you know, her consideration and kindness. And I said that I love him so much and I'm just so thankful for the time that I have with him, however long it may be. And I truly hope it's like, you know, lasts a whole full lifetime. But that I know that I can't control that, and I I'm just so glad to have whatever time I have. And I meant it. I meant it. That was my overriding feeling while I was going through all of this. Mind you, I would swing, like I said, into the like heights of optimism and to the depths of absolute crushing nihilism and despair and self-doubt. But my overall feeling was like, but he's here right now. I have him right now. Like, he's with me 24/7 in my body. I feel him moving. He's there. So at 24 weeks, when I went for my scheduled ultrasound and visit with the OB, he and the pediatrician and the midwife all kind of came together to let me know that, wow, it's a total miracle that, I've continued to be pregnant for 4 weeks after my water broke, and that he continues to develop and grow along the 50th percentile, which is like right on average. Total miracle. Wow, wow, wow. Now it's time for you to go to the big hospital, because if he is born anytime, like from here onwards, there is the possibility that he could live. And with each passing week, the possibility theoretically increases. And I don't know why I wasn't prepared for this. I don't know, like, it's so hard. It's so weird remembering. I was prepared in the sense that I had just done that freaking NICU placement. I had seen babies born early. The youngest one I saw was born at 25 weeks. He was not doing well. And Alex and I had talked about it ourselves. And Alex very, very strongly does not believe in suffering. I think he had a harder time. Like, he doesn't have the same degree of optimism that I have built into his personality. He's definitely a nihilist. And, he had a hard time with the uncertainty of that 4-week period for sure. And we had both talked about what it means to like have a preterm baby. I told them about some of the things that I had observed in that NICU placement. And we both felt that we didn't want him to be resuscitated if he was born before 28 weeks. And maybe that sounds crazy to some people, but that was really just based on what I had seen and how, how babies exist when they're born so preterm. And I've since met people that were born earlier than Cillian or around the same gestation as Cillian and are still alive today. One of my classmates, I learned, was born at, maybe 25 weeks. She doesn't know for sure because her mom didn't even know she was pregnant. And I've met babies who were born under similar circumstances to Cillian and are alive now. So it's not that I thought he couldn't live, and I certainly wanted him to. I just also didn't want... I was not of the feeling that we needed to do everything in our power to, resuscitate him and keep him alive. Even though I wasn't willing to terminate the pregnancy, that was more based on a feeling like I wanted Cillian to choose. And if he had to go, he had to go. But I didn't want... it wasn't coming from a place of like, no, he has to live. This baby has to live. It was more like, your vital force is too strong for me to make that decision on your behalf. That's how I felt. But when it came to the idea of having him preterm, having just seen what I had seen, I felt like I also didn't want to insist that he live. I wanted him to have a goddamn good chance of living and having a good quality of life. And in my mind, babies born before 28 weeks had a rough go. And yeah, so, and Alex was very much like, we don't let our people suffer, and we don't let the men in our family suffer. Um, he had also, in the decade, within that decade prior, had seen his father hospitalized and suffering with Alzheimer's and cancer. And I think that really informed the choice, the idea of prolonging life when life did not seem to be like a realistic, compatible option. And that was a choice of love that he was making, out of like sparing his son suffering. So we had thought about it and talked about it, but it still seemed to take me by surprise when they suggested that I go to the big hospital. And I was really resistant to it. I didn't want to go. I really didn't want to go. I felt like, no, everything's been fine at home. Like, everything has been fine. I would rather just be at home and carry on just like this and come see you every week or whatever. And I don't know, in my head, I was going to make it to 30 or 32 weeks gestation. That's what my brain was telling me. And the two doctors and the midwife, more so the two doctors, were kind of like, no, that's not, they weren't rude to me at all. They just felt that was not a good choice, and they recognized that they couldn't make me do anything, but strongly advised that I go to the big hospital, because in their mind, if I went into preterm labor before 30 or 32 weeks, which is the cutoff point of that hospital that I was currently at, the cutoff point of their level of expertise in managing preterm babies, so they could handle 30 to 32 weeks and above, but below that, those needed to be in the big city at the big hospital with like all the technology and the experts. So in their mind, if I were to go into preterm labor before 30 weeks, then, and I wanted my son to live, then I needed to be at the hospital, because that's where his best chances were. And they, made the argument, like, if you go into labor, it might go really fast and you might not be able to get to the hospital on time. And if you come to this hospital, being like your nearest larger center, then we don't have the level of expertise to manage it that they do down in the big city. And that makes sense from a medical perspective, but I really feel like I was kind of talked into it, which is often what happens to pregnant women and women in labor. They, whenever, and these two doctors were like of the utmost respect. They were simply presenting things as they saw it. When the premium is life at all costs, then anytime you play the dead baby card, like your baby could die, your choice could cause your baby to die, like almost all women are going to buckle under that and go with the suggestion or the recommendation of the air quotes experts. And that's what I did too. And first I just went down for a visit. And then I ultimately, it just, a visit turns into coercion into staying. And basically that's what happens. And so when I was like 24 weeks and change, like I think it was a couple days later, the obstetrician organized like kind of a consultation for me. And so Alex and I went down together to talk about, the options and to have a level 3 ultrasound done. And one of the biggest, most important questions, I don't even remember who we talked to. Honestly, I don't feel like we talked to anyone. It was one of those hospitals that was so big that you're like completely 100% an afterthought. Anyway, clearly I talked to somebody. I don't remember who it was, but, and everybody has a different opinion too, by the way, because medical science is called science, but it's actually more of an art insofar as much as science would like to present itself as being black and white and crystal clear, and there being a right answer and a wrong answer, there seldom is. Everybody practices in a different way. Everybody has a different perspective. So anyway, I went and spoke with 2 strangers and then never saw them again. Legitimately never saw them again. And, the one strongly advised me to come to the hospital. That was a high-risk maternal fetal medicine obstetrician. And the other one was a neonatologist / pediatrician. And our conversation with her was more important to me because A, we were left waiting umpteen billion years before somebody actually saw us. They put us in a room and forgot about us. I'm not kidding. And I'm sitting there being like, I'm supposed to be on bed rest because I'm leaking fluid. Anyway, and so eventually they were like, oh, who are you? And like, why are you here? And we're like, we're waiting to speak with someone. We were told someone was going to come talk to us. And so finally they sent someone, and she took some time to talk to us, and we expressed our very, very deep concerns about trying to resuscitate a baby that, like, we did not want to prolong his suffering. If he did not seem like he was going to be able to live outside the womb and have a good quality of life, then we did not want him to be resuscitated. And she seemed to agree with our philosophy, probably because she saw a lot of babies whose parents, without the benefit of having had exposure to a NICU and the realities, naturally felt like they wanted everything done for their newborn child. But what that actually means is like really aggressive therapies to keep them alive. So I'm sure she saw all kinds of those things, and she seemed to appreciate our view, and she assured us that we are the ones who get to make the final call. But that turned out to not be true because we never saw her again. So there you go. Anyway, so I guess I felt like I had no choice but to go to the hospital. I really wish that our culture was such that somebody would have offered me the option of staying home and accepting that, or even until 28 weeks, just staying home and accepting that if I were to go into labor before that, probably my baby would die, but that I also would be able to pick him up and put him on my chest and let him die there. I wish somebody had presented that option. To be honest, the way it was all presented to me, I felt like I had a legal obligation to go into the hospital. And I had no idea that when you agree to go into the hospital, you kind of become, it's almost like the property of the hospital. I had no idea. Even though I was in the healthcare field, it's just different points of view. So Alex and I went home. I think I had like 2 days to be at home, and then the plan was for me to be admitted right at 25 weeks and 0 days gestation. So when I was 24 weeks and 6 days, Alex drove me down in the evening, and I stayed at my sister Andrea's apartment overnight, and she took me to the hospital in the morning. And honestly, like as I work through my memories and everything that happened continuously through time, I have different feelings about everything. Right now, I'm at a place where I feel like going to the hospital was probably the worst thing that I could have done, but whatever, it's too late now. It is what it is. And that sounds kind of flippant, but I don't mean it that way. It's just like truly just knowing that what's done is done. But the reason I say this is because, well, a number of things. But first of all, so Andrea took me to the hospital, and it meant that, like, I had to get up and drive in the car to the city that she lived in and get out of the car and walk up the stairs to her apartment while I'm supposed to be on bed rest while I'm leaking amniotic fluid. And then I slept on her couch. And then the next morning, I had to get up with her and walk out to her car and drive to the hospital. So again, a lot of sitting upright, a lot of standing upright and leaking more fluid. And then I had to go up to the hospital. Like, nobody told me where I was supposed to go. So first we went up to the antenatal floor, and we were told, like, oh no, you have to go over to such and such building back to maternal fetal medicine and get another ultrasound, another consultation to be admitted. So we had to go back on the elevator, and I had to walk over, which was like a block and a half away, to this other building, and then sit upright in the waiting room for about an hour and a half until I was called in to go and talk to a doctor, who then told me, like, actually, no, you don't have to be here, and you have no amniotic fluid. It was called anhydramnios, which I was like, yeah, no fucking shit, assholes. Like, you're making me walk everywhere. So, of course I don't have any amniotic fluid. It's all leaking out of me. Anyway, it was really annoying, and, he just told me that the outcome was really grim. I was like, thanks, cool. That was it. That was the sum total of that consultation with yet another stranger. And then I had to walk back over to the hospital. We couldn't find any fucking wheelchairs, so back up the elevator to the antenatal unit and then finally get admitted. And of course, once I get in there, I go to the washroom, and there's, like, I don't know, like bloody show, I guess, like pinkish red tinged amniotic fluid when I wiped after I peed. And I panicked, and I told the nurse, and she was like, yeah, okay. And I was like, ah! Like, the whole thing was so stressful. Oh my God. I just did not feel like it contributed anything to the well-being of my pregnancy at all. Nothing. But anyway, I was admitted to the hospital, and I got all set up. My friends Erin and Allie had come to visit me when I told them I was going into the hospital, and they took me to Walmart, where I picked out, like, some comfy pajamas and blah, 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 and some slippers and some things I would need for the hospital. They were awesome. So I was kind of, like, geared up and prepared, and had a big suitcase and my iPad and my laptop and blah, blah, blah. And I remember telling the obstetrician that I had been working with the whole time since my water broke. I remember sending him a text message, because we were friends like that, and telling him that I was on my way to the big hospital, thanks for all of his help. And he said, great, I look forward to seeing you again when you're 30 weeks, seeing you back again when you're 30 weeks. Which made me feel, I don't know if he really meant that, but I love him for it. It just, yeah. So, okay. So I was admitted to the hospital, and then it also meant that I was in a different city. I was away from my parents. I was away from Francis. I was away from Alex. I was by myself at the hospital. And it was a constantly rotating cast and crew of nurses, residents, and doctors. And it just seemed like very disjointed. And it was interesting being there, because I met, like, as the antenatal floor, which means that's people who are having high-risk pregnancies that need to be admitted to the hospital for various reasons. So whenever I went to the fridge room where I had food in the fridge, my own food, and I would go and refill my water bottle, And it was important to get up and move so that I didn't develop any blood clots and all that stuff. So just a couple times a day I would go and walk down the hall and get my water and come back. And I would meet other women and just chat with them about why they were there. And I had a couple different roommates, and chat with them about why they were there. And it was really interesting to me to hear the gaps in knowledge, because I had the benefit of midwifery training. So, I could do so much research about my condition and understand what was going on and blah, 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 and basically be my own midwife. But it was really interesting to hear the impressions that other women had about what was going on in their pregnancy based on what care providers were telling them. And to me, it felt like a lot of it was very inaccurate. Not that they were being lied to, just that nobody was verifying that they really understood, just because the reality of the healthcare system is that obstetricians, especially highly specialized maternal fetal medicine obstetricians, are in high demand, and they don't have the time for long appointments, and they see a lot of shit, and they get burnt out. They're human beings. They're not God. They're humans. But yeah, I just saw a really big gap in the system where women were very, very much misunderstanding what they were being told. So that was really interesting, and started to plant the seeds of the change in my career direction that I am currently on. And I had, let's see, I think I was in the hospital for 11 days before I went into labor. If I actually ever did go into labor. And I kind of got comfortable and like comfortable as one can be in the hospital. I didn't poo for days because I'm a person that needs privacy to poo. So sharing a bathroom was uncomfortable. And, eating hospital food. And I don't know if I felt lonely. I just did my usual coping things where I just like kept my morale up and was watching Orange is the New Black and reading this Margaret Atwood book. I can't remember what it was called, but it was Mad Adam. And I only got a few chapters in, but I was like, this is too dark for me right now. I need something optimistic. And I had some people come and visit me. I felt very loved and supported in that way. And Alex came down one day. One day I had a bunch of visitors. My parents came, and one of my longest childhood friends came to visit with her daughter. I can't remember if my parents brought Francis that day or not. And Alex came. And, I remember the day before I had gone for an ultrasound, because the plan was still weekly ultrasounds while I was at this hospital. And the ultrasound tech was so lovely and so nice. And she was like, yep, he looks great. He's growing right on the 50th percentile. And she told me the measurement of the single deepest pocket of fluid, and it was almost normal. It was almost normal. And I remember feeling so good about it. Like, okay, things are going to be okay. Things are okay. And then the next day, I just noticed, like, it was hard to tell because I had all these visitors, but I noticed that I was leaking more fluid than usual. It was like a leaky day, and it was kind of getting me down a little bit. And I wasn't saying anything to anyone, but, I would just, sometimes when Cillian would move, he would cause fluid to sloosh out, because the amniotic sac is like a little water balloon. They live in a little water balloon condo filled with amniotic fluid. But if there's a tear in it, and they move, it's going to cause some water to sloosh out of the tear. So I just thought he must have been moving a lot because I wasn't feeling anything really. I wasn't having any pain. And then eventually all of my visitors left, and including Alex. And I started to notice that there was like kind of a rhythm to the slooshing of the water coming out. Sorry for my cough. It's maybe every 10 to 12 minutes. But it wasn't painful at all. Not at all. So I made the horrible mistake. I mean, I got nervous, not gonna lie. I made the horrible mistake of telling the nurse. And all I really wanted was for the nurse to say something like, yes, you're having uterine tightenings, but they're very mild, blah, blah, blah. Let's just wait and see what happens. What an idiot I was. Why would they ever say that at the hospital where they're prepared to deal with acute emergency situations and they're expecting me to go into preterm labor? What a fool. Anyway, yeah, that was my stupid mistake. So I told a nurse that I was having these uterine tightenings. And I'm going to leave you on that little cliffhanger on the verge of preterm labor. To be continued next episode. Friends, thank you so much for being here with me today and listening to my story. Just so you know, it's a really beautiful feeling to be witnessed by you as I tell my perspective of this journey with my son Cillian. And your listening ears are deeply, deeply appreciated, more than I can ever articulate. I hope that you can find the thread of magic that runs through my crazy ramblings. And I hope that you find the thread of magic in your own life, in your own day, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Please consider leaving me a rating and or a review and or subscribing. And if you know somebody who would benefit from listening to this episode or this podcast at all, please share it. Otherwise, I will see you again, meet you again in the next episode. Take good care.